Okay, so thanks for joining me, gentlemen. Today on the line, I've got John and Nick, the developers from the Verve Precinct. My name is also Nick, so we've got two Nicks. It's auspicious. I'm from iPhone Property. And today we're going to be talking about the Christchurch property market in general, and particularly focused around a development that we have on offer, special offer, called the Verve Precinct. It's in the centre of the city. And I've got a wee bit of an agenda, but before I dive in and start hammering the guys with questions, I thought I might give you both an opportunity to introduce yourself.
Look, thank you, Nick. My name's John Baigent. I actually bought the land that we're talking about back in 2012 because it came available. In fact, it was actually two separate titles owned by two different people. So I had a bit of work to do to actually get both, because combined it was actually a good spot. And the reason I've done that is that I've been involved in doing residential townhouse type development in Christchurch for, when did I start? 2005. So I've been doing it for a few years, and when these ones are finished, there'll be over 230 apartments or townhouses that I would have put together. I actually have a background in financial planning. In fact, I started out actually working with business owners, working on their succession plans, creating assets outside the business. And I got sick and tired of fund managers actually losing my clients' money. That's actually how I got into property. And one thing led to another, and I found I was actually quite good at doing that. And it just seemed a logical progression to create the assets that other people can invest in. So that's just a very brief, broad background in terms of what I do. Nick, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, a slightly different background to John. Don't have any financial planning, but I've got a strong construction background, third generation construction. So we've got a family firm called Spandov, which is in the construction industry throughout New Zealand and Australia. We're design, construction and manufacture of building. We're probably the largest player in the market by way of consents that are issued, building consents that are issued on a per annum basis within New Zealand and growing. And whilst working within the family business, I've also got a very strong interest in development, starting from residential housing and housing projects, and have sort of taken the opportunity to move into larger construction projects by partnering with John, who has a lot of experience in that area, and I've been able to bring some different skill sets to the table by way of I guess relationships within the marketplace, supply chain, and some general construction knowledge, which paired with John's experience in the larger scale project management and construction side of things has been a really excellent fit. And we've come up with what we believe is a pretty special product and an amazing investment opportunity that I'm sure we'll talk about going forward.
I was just thinking, Nick, perhaps you might like to talk about how we met and that conversation, because I think it's reasonably amusing.
Yeah, well, we were sort of involved really in a sense in a commercial project on different sides. I was in the manufacturing supply chain of the project, and John was client side project managing the project. And a mutual friend of ours noted that we were working together. John and I hadn't met through that construction project, but knew of one another. And we got together for a cup of coffee, and we were just having a general chat around Christchurch and what we would like to do. And I said to John, oh, there's this one site in Christchurch. I said, it's an amazing location, right near Hagley Park, near the Victoria Precinct. ideal location. I said I'd give my absolute eye teeth to be able to develop a site like that. And I was quite sort of whimsical in saying that, just as though it's a dream that I'd never get to satisfy. And John said to me, well, as a matter of fact, Nick, I own that site. So you might owe me one IP if we sort this out. So that was our first meeting, and it's been a great relationship, and we're doing this project, and I'm sure we'll do more going forward.
He called your bluff.
Yeah, it was serendipitous, to say the least.
The look on his face, Nick, was to be beholden. He just jaw dropped.
Wow. Yeah. That's cool. I think if I had that kind of conversation, I'd probably be. My bluff would be called. I might be on my way out to the taxi rank pretty quickly.
Well, to give you an idea, prior to the Christchurch earthquakes, the site was the most prominent and well-known high-end apartments in Christchurch, bar none. There was no sort of gift to them, and everyone knew what they were, the establishment apartments. And so the site is pretty iconic, and as a reference point, it was pretty easy to pick it out as an amazing location. And so, I was aiming for the top when I made that sort of assessment and suggestion. Wow, that would be amazing to develop a site like that.
And as I alluded to earlier, Nick, it was one of the reasons why I latched on to the site when it became available, because of its very nature of where it was, what it had been, and the advantage of actually putting two parcels of land together to create something that allowed us to do a bit of scale. And you may know that when you put a bit of scale together, it becomes easier and more cost effective. So that was the reason why we got involved in that particular site in that particular time frame.
So the site, it's already a proven concept, of flagship style development for that area. It's because that's interesting, because the Verve is definitely a much more high end product, but compared with other let's say inner city developments that are coming online. The fact that it's already been a proven model and lasted a long time, only unfortunately with the earthquake causing that to come to an end.
Yeah, one of the design criteria that we had was that we knew that the location was ideal for high-end owner-occupiers, but it was also a good spot for investors. We've got things like the casino just around the corner, and so putting those two together is actually quite a unique combination, particularly in Christchurch at least. And we believe that having owner-occupiers at the higher echelons, if you like, will actually help to sort of drag up the value of the investment properties over time.
Well, I think it certainly will. The upkeep, an owner-occupier, the amount of investment they're prepared to put into a property over time, it is their home, and the expectations they'll have around management and high standards, there's no downside for an investor basically being able to latch onto that. Correct.
And so you've got some good quality apartments in the complex. They're all good quality, but you've got some higher end ones.
Yep.
And it's actually amazing the number of people who have bought already and why they have bought. We've got an 82-year-old who's bought an apartment actually at the lower levels because he actually wants to be close to the action. And I think that's amazing.
Sounds like my grandmother. She'd be one to do that sort of thing. Still plays tennis at 95. So I just something popped into my head, so I'm going to go off script very quickly, because I do know that the Verve, and it's probably because of what was there previously, is using some existing land rights to be a lot higher than some other surrounding properties. So could you just confirm that that's the case and what that means?
In the main tower, we are going to 34 metres, and the district plan height limit is 17 metres, so we're twice the limit.
Yeah.
And we can do that because we've got existing use rights.
And that will never be built over.
It mirrors what was there previously.
Right. And that's not going to be built over because that's now the plan.
No way. No way. And in fact, there was only one other complex that might have got close to the height and views that we would have in that area, but that's been put on hold. Right. So it really is a little bit of scarcity factor here.
So I want to jump on to talking about the area because I'm not from Christchurch. I've been there a few times. And, a lot of people watching this will not be from Christchurch. And might not even be familiar with many markets outside of, say, Auckland or where they live. So could you just sort of break down the central city area, where this is relative to the CBD? And at the same time, let's talk a little bit about what's going around it with the core projects.
Nick, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, okay. So Christchurch, effectively for the central city, you've got our four main avenues, and they form the ring of what is our central city. If you take sort of where our cathedral is, our Cathedral Square, and if you head sort of west of that, all the way down to Hagley Park, they're starting to name this area the West End. That's probably the most premium area, and that's obviously where we're located. We've got the Hagley Park, the Botanic Gardens, Victoria Street, which is was one of the first areas to regenerate in terms of the restaurants and bars after the post-earthquake, simply because it was the premium area before the earthquakes, and that's right where our hotel is located, right near the casino, and very close to the Cashel Street, all the new shopping complexes and retail that's being built. It's within that compact area of the central city, which we're very much a part of. There's a lot of new growth and regeneration, new buildings going up, and it's all brand new. And in this particular location, that's all high end. And Christchurch is a wee bit of a market within a market. Within that what I'd call dress circle area, it's going to be pretty special. If you go further out, if you head east from the city and you head into the outlying areas, they are totally different. And a lot of the media that you'll see and the growth rates, say, of only 3% will be those sorts of areas. Whereas if you come into where we are, there's phenomenal opportunity. We're still at the bottom of the cycle, but to give you an idea, Wellington has sent about up to 3,000 jobs from Wellington have been relocated to the centre of Christchurch. There's a huge regeneration of commercial business within the central city, and so far all of the projects that have been funded by the government payout, which was some 22 billion, most of that went into infrastructure, and then the first buildings on the block that got rebuilt by insurance money were all commercial buildings to re-establish the workforce, which within the central city. Now that has happened. The big obvious gap within the market within the central city has been the residential commercial-based developments. It hasn't happened because they're being funded by private developers like John and myself, and there's a screaming demand for rental within the central city. You've got the health precinct, which we're within very close walking distance from along the Avon River. The demand there for professionals within that sector it is huge and currently unmet, and that's just to name one industry. It's sort of across all professional sectors.
Look, I think to summarise it, and you're spot on there, Nick, that the Verve is actually slap bang in the middle of the Victoria Precinct, which was regenerated first because it wasn't cordoned off by the government in terms of the rebuild. So it got going, and so there has traditionally been, and there is now, a lot of bars and restaurants and so forth in that area. So there's the nightlife part to it. It is actually close to the casino, close to the town hall for a lot of the entertainment that will be there. They're spending, 127 million rebuilding refurbishing the town hall. Close to Hagley Park, which is a fairly large leisure area in terms of parklands with the golf course, the river, the gardens and everything like that. And we're very close to the actual commercial central city. So it is actually in the hub of everything that's going on in Christchurch. And there was something like 10,000 workers are coming back into the city, and most of them are back in now. I think I'm not 100% familiar with the numbers. And over the years, what I've been building has been essentially 2-bedroom townhouses for the young professionals who work in town, play in town, and actually want to live in town. That hasn't been there for the last few years because of the earthquakes. But now things are starting to get back to normal. There is that influx of people into the central city who want to be part of this whole vibrancy that's starting to emerge. We've got some fantastic buildings now in the centre, and people just starting to realise that this is actually a pretty good place to be. And so living there is actually in demand. And I think we're up to about 3,000 or 4,000 people living within those 4 avenues. The projected requirement from the council is something like 20,000 by 2041. So there's still a lot to go yet in terms of demand, and that's why we got in early and did something that was quite significant, because we knew that we'd be at the forefront of that curve of demand coming into the city, and so there would be good demand for what we're producing.
Let's talk a little bit about demand, because as the rebuild has happened, and I always laugh a little bit when I see these news stories about Christchurch rents dropping a bit and going up a bit, there's oversupply, etc. Because I think, if there's slightly less than perfect overlap of house being available, person being there, house being available, person being there, the Herald and etc. are quite quick to talk it up. But I can see from the stats, population projections and the jobs coming in, that any supply from the current building boom that's happening is going to be absorbed, and it'll be absorbed before we know it. And at the same time, there was a when there probably still is lingering, some what you call as-is, where-is houses, which were not taken away, but they're still sort of sitting there taking up some tenants that are going to, how much longer are people going to maintain those if they can't insure them and they can't lend against them and treat them as a real asset? So I see a lot of, not a lot, but some negative press around just the current rental state of the market in Christchurch right now. And I just wonder if that isn't causing people to project that 5, 10, 15 years into the future when it's definitely going to be a different city very, very soon.
Absolutely. And first up, bad news sells. And so that's what people are going to focus on. There is a perception, and supply and demand actually is at play here. After the earthquakes, we didn't have a lot of houses. I think we lost 10 or 12,000 houses. And it was slow to do stuff in the central city, so people who could, okay, let's go build some houses. And so we got that oversupply because of the demand. And we're not talking about one market. There are lots of different markets. When you talk about Christchurch and it's a bit sluggish, yes, there's an oversupply of houses in the suburbs. There's also an oversupply of townhouses in the suburbs. And why some people actually went and built them there, I've got no idea, because I don't know that they actually put much thought into who was actually going to use them. But when it comes to apartments and townhouses in the central city, there is not an oversupply, there is actually a shortage. There is demand. And so if people can think about that and forget about all the negative press, because quite frankly, we talk about statistics. And Nick, you're right in terms of the as-is, where-is. There was a huge number of properties where people got an insurance payout and took the cash and didn't do anything. They're still usable, and so they were renting them out. And so that's going to have a dampener on the supply of houses, and they are houses. They're not necessarily townhouses or apartments in the central city. And so even if they get sold, you might take $1 million property that was sold for, say, 700,000 because it's as-is, where-is. It gets recorded as 700, and so it looks like there's been a drop in the market. That's actually holding everything back. What happens in a couple of years' time, my estimation, that those will have moved through the system. What's going to happen to demand and supply and pricing? I think we are right, and Nick, you did make a comment about we're at the bottom of a cycle. I think all things point to the fact that we are at the bottom of a cycle.
I do have one comment too around the rental market, because you did mention that the prices have dropped. And from what I have seen in talking to development colleagues of mine who have done some reasonably significant developments, I've had outstanding rental uptake within their new developments. And there's a real difference between old junk stock, which has in recent times had rent decreases and difficulty renting, versus new post-quake built stock, which has just flown out the door and rented quite easily for strong rents. And that's yet another distinction within that rental market that doesn't get reflected in the stats. And I'm quite clear on that new product in good locations is renting easily and for as good a money as it ever has. It's a strong market in that sector, in that section. Yeah.
Well, they won't be building anymore in that central area once it's filled too. So it's something else that people.
That's right. It's limited. It's scarce to get a block of the size that we have, and of the which has a development potential, which the site had. Obviously, as John's already mentioned, a number of sites that have the height ability that our site has is small. There's only a couple of sites in Christchurch, and to get a product on a site in this location actually required that height to make it stack financially. Had it not been for that height, we wouldn't have been able to offer investment product in this location. And in this particular location, new investment stock will be unseen. It's just not happening for the new build in the area. It's almost predominantly, I won't say exclusively because I can't, there would be crystal ball gazing, but I can very clearly say that it will be predominantly owner-occupier in these areas. It is premium.
So that's a really interesting point. So you're saying that in the area where the Verve is, it's only because of the height that you're able to get to, because of the size of the development, that you're able to make any kind of investment product at all.
Yeah, and John will talk more about that. Do you want to talk to Nick about the original phase 1 design that didn't stack initially, and we had to redesign and utilise the full height of the site?
Yes, we can talk about that. Originally, we weren't going to go to the height that we're at. We were going to go to, I think it was 8 levels. And we actually had agreement from our neighbour that they would support that, because we were going to support a development they were doing, which required some neighbours' consent. Unfortunately, they went and sold their property because they couldn't actually get the overall resource consent they wanted. So the new purchasers gave us indications that we would be supported, but in the end they didn't support us. And so we were forced to rethink what we were doing. And so excuse me, I've just got a call, I should have turned that off. And so we actually said, well, okay, if you're not going to support us, bugger you, we're actually going to go to the full height that we can and cast more shadow over your property than you'd expected. So, and we had the right to do it, so we just did it. And so what we've got now is the result of that. And
what that's enabled us to do, though, also is to add in investment stock into the project. When it was just 8 levels, it would have been 8 levels of owner-occupier, and it would have been more run-of-the-mill, as in premium location, premium product for the owner-occupier market. But because we then did say, right, we will go to the full 11 levels, we can create a bit more diversity in the product mix, and that was viewed very favourably by the town planners, because they love to see some diversity within the tenant base and see some young professionals living with families and also retirees all living within that community mix. They thought that was a really good representation of the central city, and created a good vibe, and hence the name Verve that we've named the project. That's why.
Putting my greedy property investor hat on for a second, the thing that jumped out to me when you said that you did the numbers, and only because you're able to go to the level that only you are able to go to, where you're able to put investment product in there and make it viable, would mean that there won't be any other investment product beyond the Verve in the hottest district in Christchurch. Have I joined the right dots together?
Yes, you are.
You have. I mean, there possibly will be others, but highly unlikely.
Right.
They will not quite be in this premium location. Once again, they will head further away from Hagley Park, getting more east, and they will still be good locations, and they'll be probably locations that John and I will look to develop down the track, but they won't be this premium location.
That's actually really, it's not only the premium location. You talked about a flight to quality earlier on. Because we have got that ability to deliver quality, we can actually lift the quality of what we're producing for those investment properties. If it was just straight investment property, we probably wouldn't be doing the same level of quality as we're doing right now.
Let's describe the units themselves that are on offer. So we've got a special pre-construction price for iPhone property clients at the moment. And it's 5 dual key units on the second level. Could you just run through these properties, just give a brief description of them, and talk about some of the differences that you've been able to add in here to raise that level versus what you'd be doing if you're doing more of a, let's call it a lower cost development in a further out location?
First up, these units are over 2 levels. So while they're level 2, the bulk of it is actually on level 3. And we've done it that way because we wanted to be more cost effective with the amount of space that we use. We didn't want to have literally a hallway on every floor because that's inefficient use of space. So on level 2, we enter, and then immediately you could either go upstairs to the next level or into the studio unit. Now, I understand that these are effectively 3-bedroom apartments configured as a 2-bedroom and a studio. My understanding is that's unique in the Christchurch marketplace. There aren't any others configured that way. And so it allows people to live in their 2-bedroom apartment and have a studio as an income, or vice versa, or again as a dual key allows for the 2 income streams for that 1 unit or 1 apartment. Because of the scale of the development, we're able to put in some good quality appliances. You can imagine with 62 apartments, we can actually get a little bit of buying power. And so we prefer to actually do a little bit better in spec than we could do. I've always had the philosophy of a bit above average, because if you think about a normal distribution from a mathematical point of view, the bulk of the market sits at the peak of that normal distribution, which is effectively the mean. If we're a bit above that, we're actually doing better, but there's still a lot of people that will benefit, rather than sort of being at the cheap end of the market or at the really expensive end of the market. So we've just made it in such a way that if someone who bought this in a few years' time wanted to sell, what we're producing is in a range where there are a lot more buyers than being in a small market. And that makes it a lot better for people to liquidate their investment if they need to. Well, why you would, I don't know.
And the benefits of a dual key, because a lot of our folks might be hearing this word for the first time. So a dual key is a single apartment that's been split into 2 with a single entrance. You go into the property and that splits off into 2 separate units.
These have got a little foyer at the entranceway with a door that goes through that up the stairs to the main apartment, or a door to the left or right, depending on which one it is, into the studio. And so you can have 2 different tenants in your 1 apartment, and they don't necessarily need to cross each other's paths. Both have got full kitchens, washing machines, the works. And
it's 1 set of rates and 1 set of body corporate fees.
Correct.
Because of that's the benefit. So you're
effectively getting 2 apartments for the price of 1.
If you look at your typical body
rating, you're generating a lot more revenue for the same sort of outlay in terms of body corp rates. So it's a real rental income play, but you're also in this particular location, and given that sort of flight to quality, there is a strong capital gains aspect to it. So it's both. I have a copper who did a development in a city within the 4 Avs, not in in as good a location. The quality spec wasn't as high, and his properties from when they bought them off the plan within 12 months had gone up $100,000 by completion.
Wow.
And that's the sort of thing that we're seeing within Christchurch. And this will be exactly the same. Probably the appreciations will be greater than, because the special deals we're offering, they're actually buying they're gaining that equity on purchase. So, you know, in that particular example I gave you, that those purchases were based on their current market appraisal of value. We're actually offering slightly more than that, and it is only pre-construction and on a limited number for iPhone.
And I'll finish up on that note with just, if you're watching this and you're interested in this project, please get in touch with us. I'll have some contact details in the footer. So just to sort of try and wrap this up, and I hate doing summaries because I miss something out. The location is as good as it can get. Centre of Christchurch. It will only be built once. There's potentially one other property in the entire city that's going to be able to do a similar project. Beyond that, no. The fascinating point of that is investment properties where the price to the rent are going to stack up in this area for an investor are going to be very, very limited, just because of the height limitations. I just find it fascinating that you came to that as you were working through your project. Wasn't even in the original plans. The Christchurch market, as anyone who's reads headlines on the Herald realises, it has gone through a bumpy ride in the last probably couple of years as supply has come on, and the jobs are starting to come online, and it's this sort of a thing. But those jobs are still going to be coming on. There's more and more projects coming into completion now. Workers are being relocated to the central city, and now the residential development is starting to catch up. At the same time, it's fair to say that construction in the outer suburbs will be dying off because they have enough houses there now. So the opportunities, for new builds are going to be in the middle of town. And at the same time, the as-is, whereas stock, which, now that those homes with issues it's 6 years since the earthquake. They're going to start to look pretty dated, and as John has said, work their way through the system. So normality is starting to resume itself. And from here is a lot more projectable than Christchurch might have been 2 or 3 years in the past. And what you're offering is a significant discount to valuation in an area where properties, by the time they're finishing up, are appreciating beyond that valuation even higher. So it's just a fantastic opportunity all around.
That's correct.
Did I miss anything? No,
that's spot on.
Excellent. Hey, well, thanks, gentlemen. Really appreciate your time. Talk to you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
A pleasure.
Appreciate it.